Hello and welcome to the first episode of my podcast. It's called the Independent Learning Podcast, and yeah, I started this because there's this podcast I really like called Oral Presentations that I think everyone should go and check out. Everyone, there's two people listening to this, but if that, but yeah, I've always liked that podcast, and I've always been interested in comedy and all that good shit, and you know, I've always wanted to do something like this, but the thing that really solidified it for me was I was in a math class. I'm in college, and this is my third year, and I realized I can't do that shit for the rest of my life. So I was like, might as well try this out. Um, yeah. Quick synopsis of this: every week is a new topic, or maybe every week is a new topic, but 2 weeks in a row might be the same thing. Like if I'm doing a long book or something like that. And every topic is just whatever I'm interested in. And yeah, that's basically the short of it. Um, I might do some intros like this that are short. I might do some that are long. I don't know if anyone's listening to this, which no one is. Maybe, maybe not. I don't fucking know. Let me know what you would prefer. If you would prefer if I would just go straight in, or if you want an intro like this first, or something longer maybe, depending on how I'm feeling. Depending on if I got anything to talk about, which this week I don't. I just hate fucking school, man. Um, God, I'm so fucking pumped. But yeah, and these first few weeks are gonna be things I've researched previously, so I might be a little more knowledgeable about them. But um, other weeks are just gonna be things I researched that week that I found interesting. So this first one is something that I'm gonna have some trouble with towards the end. The beginning is easy, but the end is it gets tough for me. Oh, and also, um, I do notes for all this shit, and all the notes are gonna be on an Instagram that I'll put a link to in the description for the podcast. Um, yeah, dude, just fucking hoping this works out. You know what I mean? It's this, win the lottery or die. So, um, yeah, I guess we'll get started on our first ever topic of the podcast. Uh, this topic is Australian Aboriginal spirituality. I chose this topic because maybe 8 months ago I saw a video about it, and it was like I wasn't high or anything, but watching the video made me feel like I was high. Like the way the guy explained it and made all these like crazy connections between shit, it just like blew my mind. And I was like, more people got to know about this, but I'm not smart enough to fucking explain it the way he did. So I'm just kind of go over the basics and then do a little bit of the more nebulous ideas, like the interconnectivity of the universe. But yeah, I guess that's it for the intro to this podcast. So let's dive right into Australian Aboriginal spirituality. Um, I figured we'd start off with the basics of Australian Aboriginal spirituality by talking about the history of the Aboriginals. So people say that they arrived 50 to 60,000 years ago in Australia. No one really knows. Like when someone tells you something like that, like it's a concrete fact, they don't know. It's like with Indians in North America. They're like, at first it started off with 20,000 years ago, and now we're up to like 35,000. So they don't know. It could be as much as 100,000 years ago. But the important thing when talking about that, I just heard a loud rumble. I don't know if you guys can hear it. Is that it's the oldest unchanged culture in the world. Like they didn't have any contact with anyone outside Australia. I mean, Yeah, for 35,000 years at least, is how long they were uncontacted for. There was some minor trading in the north, but other than that, completely uncontacted for 35,000 years. And the culture, they believe, is unchanged because their lifestyle was kind of unchanged. They were hunter-gatherers until like 1788, so almost the 1800s. Like, dudes were running around with like guns and fucking early computers and shit, and these guys were hunting and gathering. So, like, entirely, that's it. It's not like with the Indians in North America where they had like corn or like tobacco or like some type of domesticated anything. These dudes were just balling the fuck out with sticks and stones. So, I mean, good on them. They survived that long, so who are we to say? That's shitty, but the theory about how they got there is a land bridge. And on the notes, I drew a picture of the land bridge, but if you guys know where Papua New Guinea is, it's like right above Australia, and then there's that point on like the top right side of Australia. That's partially how they think they got there, but it still wasn't a permanent, like, full land bridge between like Asia and Australia, so they had to go by boat. And they think this is some of the oldest seafaring in the world because they got there 50, 60,000 years ago at least. So these guys were sailing on boats, you know, 60,000 years ago in order to get to Australia. But yeah, they think they came down through Asia into Australia about 40,000 years ago. Yeah, they were hunter-gatherers with food forests, which is kind of like where you burn off the underbrush and you cut down the plants you don't want. So, I mean, they did have some type of agriculture, but it wasn't like domesticated. It wasn't like they had specific growing seasons. They weren't planting anything themselves, really. So, it was just these kind of controlled areas of wild forest that had wild plants that they would eat, like millet, other grains, shit like that. Alright. So the men hunted large game and the women gathered and hunted small game. And hunting was like very deeply related to the spirituality. Everything is, I think. You're gonna find that. And some big hunts were preceded by rituals, and sometimes they did it afterwards as a thanks to the ancestral beings that we'll talk about later in this episode. But yeah, hunting was a big deal. I don't think they might have used boomerangs, but I feel like the men wouldn't have because the women were the small game hunters, and you're not killing a fucking kangaroo with a boomerang. So it makes sense that the women probably used the boomerangs. This is off the top of my head, I don't know. That could be wrong. It's just a theory. But they lived in these super, like, complex, like, societies, I guess, that I'll talk about a little bit later, but basically they lived in, like, what they called clans, which is basically a fucking tribe, but they call them clans. In North American tribal shit, a clan is kind of a different thing, kind of not. But some of those clans were part of bigger nations. Um, and yeah, it was just lots of clans in a nation. The clans, I don't think they might have been named after animals like the ones in North America, but I don't think so. Um, and most of these clans were semi-nomadic, so they weren't moving all the time, but like part of the year they'd be like, when what ass mouth. If anything you don't like about this, let me know, because this is the first one, so I have nothing but improvements to make. This is gonna be dog shit if anyone's listening to this. Yeah. Yeah, so they were semi-nomadic. I gotta check the notes every once in a while, get me back on track. Um, so they'd spend like maybe half the year in one place and half the year in the other. And Australia's kind of in a tropical area, and this doesn't apply to like the outback, but it does to the coasts where most people live, and most of the people back then lived, because the outback is straight desert. So yeah, they were semi-nomadic. A lot of them lived on the coast. They ate kind of whatever they could, and yeah. But there were small wars between those clans that lasted years, and the aim of a lot of these educational videos are like made by people within the world of education. So it's kind of like you have to take everything they say with a grain of salt because they were like, I'm not gonna get into the fucking politics of it because I don't really care. Doesn't make me any fucking difference. But they were like, these wars weren't like European wars because they weren't over seizing land and gaining power or control or whatever. It was about showing superiority. And it's like, I don't know, dude, it's kind of the same thing, but they weren't the same in like the way they were fought. I will say that. It's like the way they were fought was like one or two people would die or get injured or whatever. It'd be like a small little skirmish, and then like a few months later, the same thing, and they'll go on for a couple years. So it was kind of just like beef. It wasn't like a war. It was like fucking beef between a couple people. It looks like beef is like peeking the mic or some shit. I don't know. This is a broken gaming headset, by the way. So not very high quality, but they were like beefing between. There was beef between the clan, and they pull up. They pull up with the scraps, and by scraps I mean bow and arrows with flint heads, and they like kill a couple people, yell at them, do a little dance, and then leave. um, so that's basically what the wars were. So I guess the wars, they didn't gain or lose territory, they just kind of fought, which I think is probably bullshit. Like, I'm not gonna kill someone just to show superiority. I don't know. And it's like, show superiority, why? Like, because they're gonna come get your shit. So I think that's what it was. But on to like the social structure. So aunts and uncles were considered mothers and fathers to their nieces and nephews. So it's like my brother has kids, and so I would be considered a father to those kids. And he's my half brother, so I don't know, but let's just say he's my full brother. I would be considered a father to his kids by the Aboriginal Australian way of like setting up families. And then I think it's like, I can't remember exactly. I probably should have written a lot more down in these notes. When I was preparing these notes, I was like, I'm just gonna freestyle it and I'll just get the basics down. But I mean, I'm just kind of nervous, and I've never done this before, J. Cole. But but yeah, and I think so. What I was gonna say is that um, I think anyone in the clan was considered like an aunt or an uncle to the kid, and this was probably to like something, a tradition that came from a purpose of like preventing inbreeding or something like that. That's probably why a lot of it happened like this, was so that people wouldn't inbreed and they knew how important that was. And so that this just kind of became a tradition. Isn't that the saying? Traditions are like rules for things we no longer need or something like that. I don't fucking know, but um maybe I could Google that real quick. But yeah, they basically lived in these super complex social structures or family structures that um nowhere else in the world has these complex of social or of family structures. Like, it's probably the reason I didn't write that much down last night is because I didn't understand it. So that's just a little bit about that. They lived and interacted with extended family. So sorry. So that's kind of expected with a lot of these old places. America's really the only place that doesn't do that too much, and even then we still do it. Um, but yeah, Northern Australians had some interaction with the Indonesians a few thousand years ago. It was pretty recently in the lifetime of Australian Aboriginal life. Damn, I just dropped my notebook. But yeah, and it was mostly for trading, and Yeah, they're just talking, trading. I don't know. I think they trade a lot of cloth because the Aboriginals obviously didn't have any access to cloth because they didn't have anything domesticated. Or not like, yeah, probably no access to cloth. Just like animal skins and shit. And, okay, so that's kind of the history and a little rundown of the Australian Aboriginals. Their history, the way they do things. Damn, it's my bad, y'all. Um, but yeah. And so we're on to the spirituality. And I think, yeah, I just kind of did that to maybe put in context some of the spiritual practices. So we're going to start off with, I guess, the basics. And nothing about this is basic, dude. This shit is mind-blowingly like advanced for like hunter-gatherers. Like their understanding of shit is crazy. Like I don't I don't know how they did, and this is thousands of years old. So they figured this shit out like before farming existed, probably, or like advanced farming. So, I mean, that's just crazy that they had like this complex of an understanding of things. And it's like, while living in like caves and shit and throwing rocks at kangaroos, they had a very complex understanding of the universe. I can't do math, and these guys figured this shit out. So. But yeah, we'll start off with the basics of the dream time. The dream time is kind of, it's hard to explain like the rest of this is, like I said. But it's the beginning or the creation of the universe and of the earth. And I'll kind of get into this later on. My notes have it in a, I've put it in a better way, or I copied down the way the guy said it. So it's gonna be a lot better than me trying to explain it right now, but I will try to explain it right now. It's ongoing, but it happened in the past, present, and future. So it's like I don't know how to explain it. It yeah. I'm not gonna try to actually. Now that I think about it, I think I'm just gonna go on to what my notes said next. It's ongoing. It influences the past, present, and future. Often involves cosmic beings creating everything. So, yeah, they kind of believe that there's a ton of different beliefs, but there's kind of a general consensus around it, I guess. It's kind of like the Abrahamic religions in a way, where they're all different, but like they're all kind of similar in a way. But they all contain these cosmic beings that created everything. The most famous one that you guys might have heard of is the rainbow snake. And he basically, the story goes that he created the earth by like wiggling around and like carving valleys and rivers and like burrowing and like rocks coming up and stuff. But that's just one of them. And then there's a whole bunch of different ones. A lot of, if you believe in aliens, which maybe I'll do an episode on aliens if you guys say you do. But actually, if you say you do, I won't because you probably know more than me and don't need to listen to it. But a lot of people, a lot of the hardcore alien guys point to the cave paintings of Australian Aboriginals and their ancestral beings as like evidence of aliens because people are like, oh, these look like when people say they got abducted. This is what they look like, these cave paintings, and how would these people who painted these paintings know that? Which is, that was a nonsense way of putting it, but you guys get what I mean. But yeah, so the ancestral beings do kind of look like aliens, and a lot of these um, Dreamtime stories contain like moral lessons, and it's not just about the creation. Like a lot of the time, there's like stories about heroes or like how your family came to be and like how the ancestral beings interacted with your clan's ancestors. So This is hard. But I'm sorry about that. Yeah, that's basically a little rundown of the dream time. I mean, basically everything I've said so far could have been an episode in and of itself, because like this is pretty advanced stuff. But I'm just gonna kind of the point of this is to give you a short little rundown of just whatever topic I'm interested in that week. Um, water or something. I ain't used to talking this long, but yeah, that's basically the short of the dream time. The rituals. So the rituals were very important to their sense of spirituality. I might get into it a little later, but they'd spend like all day doing rituals, like hours a day, as hunter gatherers doing rituals. Like you gotta think about like church. How long is church? 2 hours at most, 2.5 if it's like Easter. Or Easter might be shorter. I don't know. I haven't been to church in forever, but these guys would spend hours a day, and they didn't even have like all the free time and amenities we had. So that kind of shows you how deeply ingrained into their daily life their sense of spirituality was. Like that they could have been out hunting or gathering or making houses and shit, like building civilization. Yeah. But instead they were doing their spiritual shit, which a lot of it was like chanting, painting, storytelling. So I mean, everything they did was related to their spirituality, but like actively trying to raise their consciousness, they did that for like 4 hours a day, which is like kind of unheard of. And everyone did it. It wasn't just like the shaman or like some type of religious leader. It was like everyone did that much. But rituals were and are, I'm sure some people still practice it, but I'm sure it's not common. They were used to mark important events such as like the transition into adulthood. Like you've heard about these type of things before, like in the Amazon where they make the kids get bit by the fucking ants and shit. They had their own version of that, which is, yeah, I don't know exactly what it was, and there were a ton of different ones, but because these groups were just kind of spread out. But yeah, rituals were used for like puberty ceremonies, the changing of seasons, in times before and after big hunts, storytelling, dancing, and chanting were important parts of the rituals, and also painting. Like I said, they had a lot of paintings, and you guys know what the paintings look like. You've probably seen something like it. It's like a bunch of little dots, and it makes up like a kangaroo or like a circle. Sometimes it's just a bunch of circles. Sometimes it's like a dude looking thing, but yeah. So now you heard me talk a little bit before about the ancestral or cosmic beings. These are the alien looking dudes. They were, they believed that they were descended from these things in one way or another. They taught the people how to live. So, I mean, this is where you can kind of see how they got their myths. And the ancestral beings, it's hard to tell from the paintings, but they do kind of look like people. Like they're people shaped and all that good stuff. So, it's like, you can see how they got there from that. Like you can make the connections. And they kind of look like, a lot of them have like spikes coming out of their heads or like things that kind of look like that. And if you look at the Australian Aboriginal people, that's kind of what their hair looks like. They all got Einstein hair. But if Einstein chanted for 4 hours a day instead of doing dumbass nerd shit, if Einstein ruled, basically, he that's what they'd look like. But yeah, they taught the people how to live, and they are central figures in the art and stories. Yeah, that's kind of all I have about ancestral/cosmic beings, at least for right now. We might talk a little bit about it later. I don't really. I do not know what happened there, but my mic just turned off for some reason. I charged it all last night, waiting for this oh so important moment that no one's gonna hear. But this is just kind of a practice type of thing. Like, I figure you gotta start somewhere, even if it is in a closet in a fucking dorm without AC. And I'm sweating my ass off right now, but yeah, gotta start somewhere. Gotta try to make that money. And this isn't about money yet. If I end up making money off this, great. If I don't, it was good practice. So eventually, I want to do stand up. I've always wanted to do stand up, but as you can hear from my fucking shaky ass voice, dude, I sound like I'm about to cry, but yeah, this is just good practice. Where were we? In who's it? I'll just repeat this last line about the ancestral/cosmic beings. I don't think I said that yet. A lot of this has to do with like space and stars. A lot of the stories do. Like, there's this one about the seven sisters who become seven stars, which is also in a Greek myth. So that kind of shows you where these guys were at in terms of their spirituality. Like, they were up there, dude. They were not lacking. Which also explains maybe why they were hunter-gatherers for so long, because they spent so long figuring this shit out, dude. But yeah, the last line of it is how important they were to like the art and the stories the ancestral beings were. Which obviously these are like, I guess they're gods, or however you want to put it, but they're not gods of specific things. Really, it's hard, and it's not all the same. Some of them do have gods of specific things, some don't, or spirits of specific things. But now we're on to totems. Totems was kind of hard for me to understand and think about, but because you think totem and you think like totem pole, or like, what's that movie, Brother Bear, where he has like the bear around his neck and like that's his totem. But in this case, totems takes on a different meaning, and that's natural objects believed to be linked to heroes and important figures in the Dreamtime stories. So people had like your totem might be like it, and it's anything in nature, and so it could be like, it could be an animal or it could be a plant. But one of the important aspects of it is that like you were meant to protect that thing. Like, if your totem was a koala, you had to protect. It was your job to protect koalas from being like killed in fires or overhunted, or you're kind of the spokesman for koalas, I guess, because koalas can't really speak for themselves. So it was your job to be like, yo, stop fucking with the koalas. Which, I mean, I guess is a good thing, but um, so everyone kind of had their own different totems, but they were also kind of the same, because it was like your clan or your nation and your family also had totems. And so, like, I guess if my family, I was gonna try to explain it, but it's pretty simple. It's like every family had their totems and stuff, and so, and every clan did. And then I think each individual probably got their own based off like something, based off like, maybe they put like some toys down or put you in front of a wall of art, and they're like, with different paintings on it or something. They're like, choose one. And if you chose the koala, then it was like, oh, he's got the koala totem. God damn, this is not good. If anyone's listening to this, they've definitely stopped. And if you haven't, thank you. for putting up with this, but yeah, it's not good. This is just gonna practice at this point, especially because I already kind of know what I'm talking about. Not too much, but still. Yeah, and sometimes it was like a plant, which kind of fucking sucks, dude. Like, imagine you're like, oh, imagine it's like totem day. This is completely made up. This probably isn't how it goes. They're like passing out the totems. And you get stuck with like a fucking eucalyptus tree. And then your boy, John, or whatever, gets a fucking like a badass kangaroo or like a hawk or some shit. Or like one of the fucking giant ass lizards they have over there. And you get a fucking tree. I'd be pissed, but I'm sure to them they're like, trees rule too. Which I mean they do, but I don't know. I'd rather fucking be the king of lizards. Big ass lizards too. I'm talking like Komodo dragon type shit. Like these guys will fuck you up. Or you get a tree. And a tree can fuck you up too, to be honest. Especially in Australia. They have those like leaves, like the suicide leaves or whatever, that it touches you and it hurts so bad you want to kill yourself. Kind of a harsh. Well, I said that was harsh, but you guys know what I mean. Australia's tough. But, so, the land or the country is also a part of the collective spirituality of Australian Aboriginals. They call it country. It's not the country or the land, it's country or land. And it's important. They believed it was like kind of like the Native American thing of like it's a collective entity. It's alive and it needs to be taken care of, which I mean, that's all right. It's not, maybe not conscious, or maybe it is. Who knows? Fucking, I definitely don't know. I don't even know how to make my mic work for my shitty fucking podcast that no one's listening to, but um, yeah. So that's the land. They believe it's, alive, conscious, all that good stuff. And we'll get on later as to why they think it's conscious. Conscious? Fuck. I'm gonna be saying that word a lot later, so I better fucking get it right. But yeah, features of the land were important locations. Like in the stories, it'll be like, see that rock over there? That's where the ancestral being fucking did whatever. Took a dump, perchance. And that's that rock. And that rock's super important to us. And you guys have probably seen, like, I'm just using the rock as an example, but the rock is probably the most famous example of it. It's like that big, like, rock that just kind of comes out of nowhere. It looks like some shit from Mars or something. And it's just like a huge rock comes out of nowhere in the middle of the ground, like out of nowhere. It's fucking bizarre to look at. So you can maybe understand how they came to that conclusion about that story, is that an alien had to have put it there, because this rock does not look like it belongs. Maybe I'll put it in the notes, draw an example of it in the notes, but you guys can look it up for yourself. I don't know what it's called, but it is crazy. And I do understand how they, like, only way that got there is from the alien. But, or not aliens, ancestral beings. If anyone's listening to this that is a practicing spiritual Aboriginal Australian, or like follows the spirituality, that's crazy. But I guess hit me up, dude, because I'd be willing to do another episode on this that's not complete nonsense. But yeah, kind of the short of that, of the land. Oh, they also believe that they were like custodians meant to take care of the land, which makes sense. I mean, we kind of all believe that in a way, but they probably took it more serious, and it makes sense because that's how they got everything they had. Us Westerners, we have our farms and our fucking factories and shit. They did not have that. So they were like, yo, we gotta take care of this, because this is where everything comes from. And they were right. I'll give them, they were right about most of the shit, honestly. I feel like some of the ceremonies, nah, you guys were wrong, hitting a miss there. Can't blame you. But they were right about most of the shit. Art was used to tell the Dreamtime stories. So yeah, it's kind of like, I guess, what is it? Michelangelo's God creating Adam or whatever. Kind of the same thing, except there's probably like a deeper meaning to that. There's that deeper meaning to all art. All art's like that, but especially this stuff, like the way the dots are placed, like has some sort of significance. So, and art was also used to like communicate with the spirit somehow and show appreciation. So I guess it's like if I spend all this time making this art of these spirits, then they'll know how much I like take what they say seriously, I guess. But man, it was a deeply spiritual practice, just like everything else they did. Alright, so that's kind of the basics of Australian Aboriginal spirituality. Um, Now we're gonna get into some of the more complex ideas that are probably, or not complex, but like abstract and kind of complex. But this first one isn't too. It's related to that abstract idea. So, like I said earlier about how they spent all their free time chanting, um, and doing rituals and shit. Yeah, this is kind of about that. It was meant to raise their state of consciousness, um, and contact the spirits, and they did this without any kind of like ayahuasca, salvia, mushrooms, whatever type of psychedelics. They were raw dogging. These guys were beasts, dude. Spent all day hunting, and then they'd go and fucking like do some shamanistic ritual in order to try to talk to spirits, dude. It's fucking badass. It's sick, honestly. These guys are beasts. But yeah, they're just trying to contact the spirits, and they just do it by like chanting, singing, maybe a little bit of dancing. But yeah, just went in there. No PEDs, dude. These guys probably look at these fucking like tech bros that go down and do ayahuasca. They're like, that's probably how like a lot of people view Ozempic, where they're like, that's cheating, dude. They're like, we straight raw dog this shit, and like this, it's gonna be tough to try to explain it. I can't really explain any of this, but this would take like a lifetime to achieve, and to get to the dream time, this like that was part of it. Like I said, the dream time is like an ongoing thing that's like always happening and never happening. You guys can't see it, but I'm shaking my head because I don't understand it. But I mean, it makes sense that I don't understand it. They spent hours a day doing this shit. But yeah, the way they did it, I mentioned this earlier, but music, art, storytelling, chanting. I assume that chants were a big thing because, like, in all those religions that are about like raising your consciousness, like Hinduism, they chant a lot. A lot of the Native American things, they chant a lot. Buddhism, Om, that's a chant. You know what I mean? So a lot of chanting from these guys. Dancing too, playing the didgeridoo, dude. I could see how if you listen to the didgeridoo for like 4 hours, it's like cogitate. Look up cogitate if you have free time, because that's kind of how I imagine a lot of this stuff feels like. Just this guy named John C. Lilly saying cogitate over and over again, dude, and it's crazy. It's almost like scary because like you start to hear other words while he's saying cogitate. So it's like, yeah. So listen to Cogitate by John C. Lilly if you have the chance. Just headphones on, eyes closed. It's crazy, and like you start to like laugh while it almost feels high. It's like kind of like holotropic breathing if you guys have ever done that, which I also recommend you do. That shit's fun and it relieves stress. It's kind of hard, especially if you're like me. Like if you can't tell, I'm kind of running out of breath as I'm talking. And holotropic breathing has a lot of breath holding, but you guys should try it. Just look it up on YouTube. It's fun. Probably causes brain damage because it's all about like overloading your system with carbon dioxide, or maybe it's monoxide. Probably not monoxide, but it's all about doing that, and it makes you feel like you're like floating, and it feels good. It feels weird. It might feel a little scary, but I do the basic ones if you're alone, because like sometimes I get like the Tua hands when Tua had that concussion. Like his hands started getting all fucked up. That can happen to your hands. It's never happened to me because I've never done it with someone else. So it's like I'm not gonna do that, go that extreme with it. But yeah, I'd try it out if I were you guys, especially if you have a lot of stress, because it's not like other things that take the stress off, like drinking or whatever, like where you just don't feel the stress anymore. It's like you outthink the stress, or like you don't think about it. I'd say it's a better avenue of stress relief than a lot of other things that people do to relieve their stress. But on to the next thing, dude. So the the ancestral or cosmic beings spoke the world into existence. And I wrote down language is existence. I wish I wrote more down about this, but from the video and the way the guy explains it, I'll probably link the video in the description. If you guys just want to watch that, that's fair enough. Like I said, this one's just kind of practice. But it's like things can't exist without some kind of language. Like nothing can exist, even if it's like a visual language or like AI. If that ever becomes sentient, sentient, whatever. I know how the word's pronounced. I'm just like nervous right now, I guess. But if like AI were to ever become sentient, it's the language of its sentience is like computer language, so like ones and zeros. It's kind of a way to explain it, but kind of not. It's you guys kind of get what I mean. Like I think therefore I am type of thing, and everything expresses itself through some type of language, whether we understand it or not. Is kind of what I think they were getting at with that one. Alright, just have to flip my notes over onto the abstract ideas continued. The dream time is an event that is happening now. Because now is the only time that like exists, I guess. It's like I guess I can explain it like you can't prove 100% that the past happened. That you can't prove that like that you weren't just created. Like there's no way to 100% prove that in a way. It's like because you can be like, oh, carbon dating, and it's like, nope, that's just the way the world is. It's kind of like that. It's kind of like now is the only time that we exist in, and you can't prove that you were just created. Like even your memories could like be put into your head by God or whatever. I can't really explain it. But now is the only time that exists. So, and if it happened in the past doesn't really exist, so it didn't really happen. And it's also like the Big Bang. So it was happening when nothing was happening, type of thing. But so that means it wasn't happening. It's somehow related to quantum physics. That's all I could write down about that because like I can't wrap my head around this. But it's yeah, it's like that. Yeah. Yeah. And it's just like the creation. And it's always happening. And it's gonna continue to happen. It's gonna influence everything. Yeah. That one. But another thing that they explain, and this is if you listen to that Cogitate video, it's in that it's that time is circular and it works in cycles, except John C. Lilly thought that cycles were bad, but they think it's like just part of life. And the cycle is the movement between the realms of the visible and the invisible. So like everything exists all the time. It just can be invisible or visible. Not literally invisible or visible, but like visible to us. Like you. You have always existed and you will always exist. But you're not really you. You're part of the universe and you're just now everything's becoming visible. Or you're becoming visible to everything else and everything's becoming visible to you. No, that's not. You're just becoming visible to everything that's already here on Earth. And it's birth is not the beginning and death is not the end, which is a concept in most religions, but in this one it's kind of explained differently because there is no like self. It's just kind of you're just a part of the universe, and even then you're not like a part. I don't know how to explain it. It's tough to explain. It's like you're a part of the universe and you're not. Maybe this next little self or the sense of self is a temporary, negligible part of existence in the universe. I guess it's the best way of putting it. It's like you don't really. I mean, when you're here, yeah, sure, you exist and you can like live with yourself and all that and like live life, but like you don't really exist. It's tough to explain. All of this is. I don't know why I picked this for the first topic. I should have picked whales, which is probably gonna be next week's episode. Cetaceans, whales, shit like that. So yeah, you exist, you have always existed, and you will always exist, but you don't exist. Yeah, it's that type of fucking esoteric type of thing. But space and the distance between things. Oh, space or the distance between things is conscious. This things cannot exist without space. So it's like every object that exists, right? Whatever you're listening to this on, my notebook in front of me, everything. The room you're in, think about it. It has to have like space to exist. And so, yeah, just try to imagine an object without the space it exists in. Even if it's like a blank background, that's like space or like room of some kind. And so, yeah, and the space between things is conscious. Conscious. I really wish I learned how to spell that word and say that word because I'm going to be saying it a decent bit, and we're nearing the end. So internal objects, which is like your feelings, your thoughts, your sense of self, requires some kind of space, right? It's like, are you gonna? It's so hard. It's hard to understand because I don't really understand it, but like I do. I don't know. I guess that's part of the thing. You exist and you don't. You understand it, but you don't. But yeah, it's like your thoughts take up space in your mind, right? You can only think so much, and your thoughts, your memories, your sense of self takes up a certain amount of space in your mind, right? So it's like physical objects and internal objects, like those thoughts, your ego, all that shit. It's all just things that take up space, and there's no difference between it. Um, and if something like you're conscious and you take up space, so kind of therefore, you know, space is conscious somehow. I guess it's just because you're conscious and your consciousness takes up space, and the space between things doesn't really exist, and it does. But there is no difference between internal and external space. So it's like everything is conscious, in some way or another. The space between things is. Everything is conscious. Your thoughts take up space. Yeah, that's all I got, guys. That's all I have for the first episode. Call it a practice episode. No one's gonna listen to this, but it was good to get the fucking practice in. Like I said, let me know what you think about it down in the comments. Don't tell me. I guess you can tell me about the audio quality and shit, but there's nothing really I can do about that. Maybe a bit, but nothing really. Yeah, and like I said, started this podcast because I can't. No way, dude. No way I can work a fucking 9 to 5. No way I can do any of that shit. I just want to sleep all day and then record a podcast because I'm a lazy piece of shit, dude. But yeah, that's the end of Australian Aboriginal spirituality. The first episode, very complex episode. Maybe not the best idea for my first one, because I don't know how to take notes or I do know how to, but not well, and I don't know how to translate those notes verbally super well yet. But you know, you can learn anything with time, and that's the first episode. Thank you for listening, and I hope to see you guys next week if there is anyone listening. Peace.